Professor Steve Otto, Chief Technology Officer at the R&A. And my role at the R&A encompasses all things technology, but also looking after the World Amateur Golf Ranking, which at the moment has 10,000 golfers in it, and looking after the equipment rules as well. And that's the origin of where I came from and how I got into the R&A, was looking after those equipment rules. Both my degrees are in maths, and that's really where the basis came from, my sort of ability to model physical processes. So my undergraduate was at Exeter, and then my PhD was in high-speed aerodynamics, and that led me on to working at NASA. So I worked at NASA Langley in the States, working on sort of the stability of airflow. And one of the real contrasts between working at NASA and working at the R&A is at NASA you work on a very small element of things, whereas now I get to have oversight of the entire process. So really quite a strange and interesting juxtaposition of technology, mathematics and physical modelling. That led me on to come back and lecture in maths at Birmingham. So I've worked at Birmingham as a maths lecturer for 11 years, and that's where my chair is. So I have an honorary chair in maths there. And in 1998, the R&A approached the University of Birmingham to ask for help in modelling the physical processes of what happens when a golf ball gets hit by a driver. 6 years later, I then got to move north to St Andrews to form and run the group that was looking after the equipment rules. Roll on a further 17 years forward, and I've now taken on a broader role looking at technology, but I still retain that interest in the equipment rules. But underneath it all, it's about communication, it's about maths, and it's about data. The R&A originated from the Royal and Ancient Golf Club of St Andrews, formed in 1754. 250 years later, we split between the golf club and a group of companies that really oversees the governance of the game. So ruling on golf around the world, with the exception of the US, and also running the Open Championship, the AIG Women's Open and the Senior Open, as well as a whole host of amateur events. So we really look after what's in the best interest of golf now and going forward. And really our sort of North Star, our real purpose is to ensure that golf is thriving 50 years from now. And that's quite sort of future looking and quite a difficult thing to deliver on, but that's definitely what our purpose would be. We do that in conjunction with our affiliates, who are the national golf associations around the world, representing millions of golfers and listening to what they want and what they need for the game going forward. So the equipment rules is something that's been around for a very long time, but it's gradually evolved as the industry has evolved. So going back to my career at NASA, it used to be that materials were developed for aerodynamics, whereas now a lot of materials are developed for golf clubs. So the golf industry really leads a lot of material development. And to match that, we at the R&A, in conjunction with the USGA, so our partner organisation in rulemaking, try to be as proactive as we can in understanding what's happening in golf and making sure we're there at the forefront. So really equipment rules come down into three basic elements. We test clubs and balls to check that they meet the rules as they exist today. So that's some pretty high-tech testing using things from high-speed video systems through to Doppler radar. And then going on into conducting fundamental research into the physics of golf. So we interact with various universities around the world, probably most specifically in the UK, looking at running projects on understanding that physics. And then thirdly, making sure the rules are pertinent to the way the game is played. And that's where we get into really big data. And that's not just at the elite level, that's looking at how golf is played, whether it's on a Saturday morning at a regular golf club or really across the game. So it's that whole range of sort of technology and data really feeds into the equipment rules and how they evolve even today. The R&A is continually evolving, and it's evolved even in technology from something that had a fairly standard sort of IT and web and app type basis into something that's now putting technology at the core of its functions going forward. So I'm the first incumbent of the CTO position. I think that's a recognition of the organization realizing how important it is to have a defined position on this, looking at the adaptations of what we've done in the past to make sure they will sort of exist well into the future. And it's talking about how people engage, how people digest the sport, looking at opportunities we might have to engage with people in terms of their own data, but also different formats of the game. We're seeing innovations in the sport which are really fantastic. You couldn't have envisaged it 20 years ago, where we've gone from a state where launch monitors was something that was only available to the smallest group of people, and now you can go to a simulator, you can go to your local professional and really get quite detailed information back. And one thing that's happened in that space is really the sport's data structure has evolved into quite a fragmented view. So there's little pockets of data, and one of the things that's on my remit is to look at whether we can make that into a more broad-based or sort of enterprise-wide thinking for the data, so the data then becomes more useful, can help us derive insight. And where we're looking at the equipment rules and how they're evolving, we're moving from a situation where 20 years ago, we might be measuring 1,000 people hitting a golf ball. Now we're into millions or tens of millions, because that data in its aggregate is really valuable to us. The use of the data is really critical in terms of informing decisions, not only for us, but our partners and affiliates, helping them understand how golf is consumed and what's important to people. So not just sort of consumer reporting, but also looking at things like how fast people play, how much time is spent playing the game. Are there ways we can use data analysis to improve that, to improve the flow of people around golf courses? So going back to my mathematical basis, the study of traffic flow is something that can be applied on a golf course as well. So you put GPS monitoring on people, you understand how they flow around golf courses, you look at what might be a traffic jam to golfers, and helping us use those models to improve that flow around a golf course might just make people want to play the sport more. So that's just an example of the kind of insight that can be derived from having that data in an accessible form. One of the big bridges we've got to cross is, then it's a bit of a dull topic, but it's an important topic, is that data governance, to make sure the definitions are right, to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. And that comes down even to the fundamental aspect of what is a golfer, how do you define a golfer, and what defines their identity and their position within the sport. And it seems that people are more and more data hungry. So whether it's by smartwatches tracking their movement, or whether it's your phone tracking you, just trying to get people to use that data for their advantage to perhaps help them sort of engage more with the sport. But at its core, we want to maintain what is traditional about golf, and that's a lot about personal challenge. But I think sometimes that data can really help to enhance that position. And we're looking at alternative models for the sport. So one of my favorite rounds of golf was playing at Pebble Beach, but I just happened to be in a basement in Tokyo playing on a simulator. And those things are really transforming the game and the way that people are ingesting the sport and really enjoying the sport. You're seeing more and more technology being used in driving ranges to enhance that. You're not just going with a bucket of balls, you're getting data feedback, you're playing different games, and you're even gamifying the game in its sort of raw form, if you like. The AR and VR aspect is a real challenge for us. So you don't want, for instance, AR to give you an unfair advantage, but you want it to enhance your experience. So you wouldn't want, for instance, AR to tell you the line of a putt. We believe that the golfer's skill must be the determining factor in knowing how to play the shot. But that being said, there's always this strange balance between making sort of technology useful to you, but not eliminating that skill. And I think that golf still remains a very challenging sport. So it's always going to be a challenging sport, but there may be ways to help you in coaching and learning by using AR. There's definitely a revolution coming in improving simulators to be more immersive, to allow you to actually be in situ and perhaps using AR and VR to enhance that experience. So yeah, it's an interesting balance, but one thing we see coming is perhaps using those media to try and guide people on a pathway to be playing on-course golf, but also recognizing that playing in AR, VR or enhanced driving ranges is also people who are ingesting the sport and enjoying the sport. I think that it wrapped up in this question on unfair advantage. It's a really complex topic, and it's one that's why we have a state-of-the-art facility in Kings Barnes, just outside St Andrews, to sort of evaluate where technology is going. We think innovation is very good for the game, so we're not planning to stand in the way, but we need to make sure it doesn't give that disproportionate or unfair advantage going forward. So we look at these things and say, you have on one hand, you still have to hit the shot, but actually the judgment of whether the wind you're feeling is actually a 2-club wind or a 3-club wind, which club do you choose, is part of your skill as a golfer. So we evaluate all these sort of technological changes to look at whether we think it gives an unfair advantage. One of the real strengths of golf is it's a self-regulating sport. It's one of the sports really that people call penalties on themselves. So it's about giving golfers information, and yet again, that's another good use of technology to try and inform golfers to say, is this allowed under the rules or is it not allowed under the rules? We make rulings on around 2,000 items per year, and the sole purpose of that is to inform golfers whether they conform to the rules, yes or no. And broadly, golfers want to be able to know whether products conform and whether they can use them within the rules. So in terms of looking into the future and what there might be coming over the horizon, we've really turned it around in the last 20 years. It used to be that we were always playing catch up with the manufacturers, but we spend such a lot of our time sort of interacting with the manufacturers, and not only the sort of, if you like, the manufacturers you'd be familiar with, but the people behind the scenes as well, looking at what's coming. And they fundamentally want to make things that conform to the rules. They might challenge the rules, they might sort of really push us, but they do want to make sure that things conform, because golfers want to be using conforming clubs. So you have an interesting sort of balance between challenges to us and pushing as hard as they can, but always making sure that it conforms. So it wouldn't be fair for me to sort of divulge any commercial secrets on what I see coming, but technology within golf clubs is actually restricted just to being in the butt end of the grip, so just up between your hands, and the rules changed on that to allow things that can track golf clubs. So you see innovations in the game where people have a bud at the end of their grip that talks to their smartwatch or phone, and that allows them at the end of the day to download their round, know what they hit from where, and look at that after the round. At the moment, we don't allow access to that information during the round. So you go out, you record, you come in at the end of the day, and you look at how you played, and that might help you play better next time or inform your lessons. In terms of strange and mystical materials, there's always this strange material called unobtainium, that magical material that's going to give you such an unfair advantage. We're yet to find that one, but they're all still looking for it. They're still looking for that magic material. But at the end of the day, we limit performance, we limit what can be done. And I think it's all about maintaining that balance. We talk about defending the field. So it's not about whether one golfer gets an unfair advantage. It's making sure that skill is the dominant element in determining success. And that's what we use as one of our core principles when it comes to the equipment rule. It's really looking at, is really still the skill of the golfer the final deciding factor? So there's always benefits. And one thing we've seen over the last 15, 20 to 15 years is really technology has made a lot of difference. Where it used to be people had golf clubs fitted, which is the process of getting a club or a ball that really matches your swing. And it was all done on sticking your finger in the air and a little bit of anecdote. Whereas now it's based on data. People stand in front of launch monitors, hit shots, and they make informed decisions on purchases, getting better and better products that meet their requirements better. And that's something that 20 years ago was available only to the super elite. Now it's available to pretty much anyone who wants to go to a pro and buy a club, or even online shopping allows you to get equipment that matches better to your swing. So the real innovation we've seen is actually in the use of data around the sport, and that some companies are now using that data to build better products. So it's very simple sort of physics, albeit three-dimensionally, but where do you put the center of gravity in a golf club is going to be informed by how people swing and what their swings look like. And we now have golf clubs that can be adjusted between rounds, so we allow things to move weight. That allows you to move CG, and yet again it's giving you a better golf club, but always within the rules. In terms of the vision for what that vision of golf would look like, where it's thriving in 50 years, I think there will still be the traditional form of golf. People going out, enjoying fresh air, enjoying the scenery, enjoying the frustration of not being able to hit shots, but just knowing that one shot is there to keep you coming back to the game. That has an intrinsic health benefit to it. The ability for people to go out and walk into their 70s, 80s and 90s, and who knows, with future longevity, even into their hundreds, that's still going to be there. But I think it's going to be coupled with far more alternative forms of the game, more AR, VR, and who knows what's coming, maybe even things that are directly beamed into your mind, etc. So I think our role in that is to be almost the stewards of the game, to make sure that there is some semblance back to traditions, not always just hanging on to them for the sake of it, but making sure we identify what's important about the sport. And I think that's down to the challenge. We don't want to get to a situation where you can play golf by just flicking a trigger, firing the ball down the middle of the fairway. Making sure you have the challenge, and making sure that challenge perhaps carries on into the alternative forms of the game. So you're seeing in recent innovation the gamification on driving ranges, for instance. So it's not just hitting a bucket of balls and smashing them anywhere. You're now aiming for targets. You're now getting rewards for getting closer to targets. So it's bringing that challenge element through, and that's what I see our role is. In some ways holding on to tradition, but embracing technology going forward, but maintaining the challenge of the game. We see sustainability of the sport as one of the key elements of our vision going forward. And that's not just environmental sustainability in terms of the footprint on golf course. It's also elements like people traveling to play golf, etc. So looking at, perhaps on my docket, looking at the technology and data surrounding that whole sustainability piece, making sure we put in those data models to try and understand what's there, where the carbon footprint of golf is going forward, to try and inform decisions. But sustainability to me is broader than that. At Royal Portrush, we introduced an initiative to no single-use plastics used for water. And that was something we got good sponsorship and good followings for. And it was really looking at perhaps changing the sport slowly at first, but then adapting, making sure it fits within that sort of global ecosystem and it is a sustainable proposition going forward. Golf courses tend to be areas of natural beauty. They can be actually places where people can go and walk, and they're maintained green areas. We just need to make sure they do that in a sustainable way going forward. And I see my role in that is helping provide the data to inform those decisions.